My name is Lucy Grant. I'm 30 years old, and I will never forget the night my family decided to turn me into a joke at our Thanksgiving dinner. 28 people in the house, a table overflowing with food, laughter, chatter, football on TV, everything looked like the perfect family. Until my mom handed me a plate. "There's no more room," she said, her voice light like it was nothing. "You can eat out on the porch." I thought I misheard. "Outside?" She didn't look at me, just lowered her voice. "Don't make things awkward." It was 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And my coat had just been thrown in the trash by my stepfather minutes earlier, along with a line that made the whole room burst out laughing. "Pigs don't need coats." No one objected. No one stood up. I held my plate and walked outside. The door shut behind me, then, click, locked. Through the glass, I saw my sister holding up her phone, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "She's actually doing it," she said. Someone inside laughed. "Dogs eat outside." I sat down on the freezing plastic chair, my hands shaking, the food going cold. And in that moment, I understood something. They thought this was entertainment. But what they didn't know, in just 1 week, everything would turn completely upside down. That Thanksgiving night wasn't some sudden incident. It was simply the breaking point of everything that had been happening for years. My mom had me when she was very young. My biological father disappeared before I was old enough to remember him. And when I was 4, she remarried. The man I was forced to call Dad never once saw me as his daughter. He didn't hit me. He didn't yell at me every day. But he had another way. More subtle, more calculated, colder. He made me feel like I didn't belong. When my sister was born, everything became even clearer. She was his real daughter. And me, I was just the baggage my mom brought into the marriage. She had a beautiful bedroom, new clothes, dance classes. I slept in the laundry room, started working part-time at 16 just to take care of myself. If I ever asked for anything, all he had to do was glance at my mom and say, "That's what happens when you bring baggage into a marriage." My mom didn't agree, but she didn't object either. She chose silence, and that silence allowed everything to continue. Over time, I learned not to ask, not to react, not to be a burden. In that family, I wasn't the one who was loved. I was the one who had to adapt. And the worst part is, when you endure something long enough, people start to believe you deserve the way they treat you. I learned to stay quiet at a very young age. At 11, I stopped asking why my sister got full birthday parties, while I only got a small cake after dinner. At 14, I stopped stepping into family photos because he said, "It looks cleaner if it's just the real family." At 17, I started working part-time to pay for my phone, gas, school supplies, everything. No one asked me to. But no one helped either. Whenever I felt hurt, my mom would just say, "Don't make a big deal out of it. That's just how he is. You're older now, you should understand." And I did understand. I understood that in this family, peace meant I had to endure. I understood that if I stayed quiet long enough, everything would be fine. But the truth is, it was never fine. It was only quiet because I stopped speaking. The only person who never looked at me like I was a problem was her, Dakota. She didn't need to say much. Just a look, a gentle squeeze of my hand, a simple question. "Are you okay?" And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. That's why I came back to that dinner. Not for the family, but for her. If you've ever been the one who had to keep the peace by staying silent, comment 1. She was the only person in the family who never treated me like a mistake that had to be tolerated. She didn't need grand gestures, just small things, but enough to remind me that I mattered. She called me every Sunday morning just to ask if I'd eaten yet. She asked me to drive her to doctor's appointments, even though my mom was always too busy. She remembered my birthday, not with a rushed cake, but with her presence. And in a family where I constantly had to prove I was worthy, she was the only one who never asked me to. I started spending more time with her, not out of obligation, but because it was the only place I felt at ease. No comparisons, no judgment, no being treated like I mattered less. Sometimes, I would catch the way she looked at my mom when she saw how I was treated. Not anger, but disappointment. Like she had seen it for a long time, and knew she couldn't change it. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, she called me. Her voice sounded weaker than usual. "I want the whole family to have dinner together," she said. Maybe the last time I'll still be strong enough. I stayed quiet for a few seconds. I knew that house. I knew exactly what could happen there. But I still said yes. Not because I believed they would change, but because I couldn't say no to her. I knew exactly what I was walking into. That house had never been a place where I felt safe. But that night, it looked perfect. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows. Cars filled the driveway. Laughter echoed all the way to the front steps, like the kind of family everyone wishes they belonged to. Just not me. I walked in wearing a simple coat, warm enough for late November. My stepfather looked me up and down, like I was carrying something that didn't belong there. He held out his hand. "Give me the coat." I thought he was going to hang it up like normal, so I handed it to him. 5 minutes later, he came back from the garage, brushing off his hands, and said loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Just tossed it in the trash." I froze. He smirked. "Pigs don't need coats, they keep themselves warm." A few people laughed, not because it was funny, but because they didn't know what else to do. I looked at my mom. She was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel. She heard it, she understood, but she only looked at me for a second, then turned away. No words, no reaction. And in that moment, I realized something. The first door had already closed before I even stepped outside. An hour later, dinner was served. The table was set perfectly. Every chair, every plate, every seat, like it had all been carefully planned. And it had. I stood in the kitchen looking out. 30 people, 30 seats. Not one missing, not one extra. Just one thing. There was no place for me. My mom picked up a plate already filled with food and handed it to me. "Here, eat this." I glanced around. "Where do I sit?" She didn't hesitate. "Outside. The back porch." I froze. "Outside?" She lowered her voice. "Don't make this awkward. It's just for a little while." A little while. Like it was nothing. Like I was just a guest who showed up late. But I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lack of space. This was a choice. I looked past her shoulder and saw my sister standing there, smiling, waiting. Everything had been arranged. No empty chairs, no backup plan. Just me, left out of the table. I took the plate. No reaction, no argument. Because in that moment, I wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. If you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, would you stay silent or stand up for yourself? Comment 1. The door closed behind me. Then, click. A small sound, but enough for me to understand. I wasn't just sent outside, I was locked out. The cold air clung my skin instantly. The wind slipped through the cracks, making the napkin in my hand tremble. I stood there for a few seconds, like my mind hadn't caught up with what just happened. Then I turned around. Through the glass, I could see them. The table was glowing under warm light. Everyone had taken their seats. Food was being passed around. The laughter never stopped, as if I had never existed. My sister walked up to the door and raised her phone. She was recording. Her shoulders shook as she laughed, her lips forming the words, "She's actually doing it." Someone behind her said loudly, "Dogs eat outside." Laughter broke out, this time louder. Closer. I sat down on the plastic chair by the wall. The cold cut through my thin clothes. The food on my plate was already starting to cool. I didn't knock, I didn't call out, I didn't cry. I just sat there and watched them eat, watched them laugh, watched how a family could come together just to turn one person into entertainment. And in that moment I understood. This wasn't a moment of impulse. This was who they really were. I ate very slowly, not because I was hungry, but because I refused to give them what they wanted. They wanted me to knock. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to cry. They wanted a scene they could laugh at one more time. But I didn't give them that. I sat still, back straight, each bite growing colder in my hands. My fingers went numb from the wind, but I held onto the plate tightly. Through the glass, I could see them glancing at me from time to time. Not out of concern, but out of curiosity, waiting to see what I would do next. My sister came back again, tapped lightly on the glass, and gestured, "Smile." I looked straight into the camera, and I smiled. Not because I forgave them, but because I knew something. They didn't. About 40 minutes later, the door opened. My mom stood there like she had just finished a task. "Come in for dessert." Her voice was gentle, like everything had been completely normal. I walked past her without saying a word, straight into the living room. She was sitting there, Dakota, wrapped in her familiar wool blanket. She reached for my hand the moment I got close. "Why are your hands so cold?" I looked at her. Just for a second. Then I lied. "My car heater's broken." I didn't want her to know. Not then. But deep down, I had already decided I wouldn't forget. And this time, I wouldn't stay silent forever. That night, my sister posted the video. Not publicly, just in her close friends list and the family group chat. A short clip. Me sitting on the back porch holding a plate of food, the glass door shut behind me, laughter echoing from inside. Caption: Thanksgiving entertainment. Someone screen recorded it and sent it to me, with a message, "Please tell me this was staged." I didn't reply. I saved the video, saved the caption, saved every message. Not for revenge, but because for the first time, I had proof. For years they called me sensitive, dramatic, difficult, but this time, it wasn't my words anymore. It was their actions, their laughter, their silence, all of it, captured. I watched the video once, no skipping, no fast forwarding, just watching myself sitting out there and realizing something clearly. I didn't want to explain anymore. I didn't need them to understand me. All I needed was for the truth to be seen. If you've ever had your story twisted by others, would you stay silent or keep the evidence? Comment 1. There was something they didn't know. 3 years before that Thanksgiving night, things had already started to change. That day, my grandmother called and asked me to drive her to an appointment. I thought it was a doctor's visit, but it wasn't. It was a lawyer's office. After the meeting, we sat in the car. She held her bag tightly in her lap, staring straight ahead for a long time before she spoke. "I changed my will." I shook my head immediately. "You don't have to tell me that. It's your private business." But she turned to me, her expression serious. "You need to know, because when the time comes, they'll make you feel like you stole it." I stayed quiet. Then she said something I will never forget. She was leaving the house, to me. Not just any house, but the very house my mom and stepfather had been living in, rent-free for 15 years. The house everyone in the family believed would eventually belong to them. I said no, right away. Not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't want to become the reason for a war. But she shook her head. "This isn't about giving you something," she said. "This is about fixing what's been wrong." In that moment, I understood. Some people see everything. They just choose the right time to act. For those 3 years, I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom. Not my stepfather. Not my sister. I stayed silent while they lived in that house as if it had always been theirs. My stepfather would talk about the future of the house in front of his friends. He discussed remodeling the kitchen, expanding the living room, even refinancing it, like the paperwork was just a formality. My mom started spending more too. New furniture, decorations, things beyond what she could actually afford. Once I overheard her telling a friend, "Once the house is ours, everything will feel easier." They didn't save. They didn't prepare. They had no backup plan. Because in their minds, the ending was already decided. They just didn't know. It was a story they wrote themselves, not the truth. And my grandmother, she saw everything. She saw how they treated me. The times I was overlooked, dismissed, hurt. She didn't say much, but she remembered. She waited, and when the time came, she didn't just speak, she acted. And that action would change everything. 1 week after Thanksgiving, everything exploded. My grandmother called a family meeting. I didn't go. She had already told me, if I showed up, they would turn it into an attack on me instead of listening to her. So I stayed home and waited. Less than an hour later, my phone started buzzing. Calls, messages, one after another, from people who had never once asked if I was okay after that night. I didn't pick up. I just watched their names appear and disappear. Then finally, a message from my mom. "What did you say to Grandma?" Another from my stepfather. "You have no idea what you've just caused." And from my sister, "You're insane. What did you do to her?" I didn't respond. Not a single message, not one call returned. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who had to explain anymore. They had just learned something. The house was never theirs. It never had been. And the person they looked down on the most was the one holding everything. I set my phone down and took a sip of coffee. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like control, quiet, clarity. If you were treated badly for years, and one day you held the power, would you stay silent or make them face the truth? Comment 1. 3 days later, I agreed to meet my mom. Not at the house. No stepfather. No sister. Just the two of us, at a cafe near my workplace. The moment she walked in, I knew she wasn't there to apologize. That look in her eyes, that tone in her voice. Not regret. Calculation. Your grandmother isn't in her right mind anymore, she said as soon as she sat down. You know that. She's easily influenced. I didn't say anything. I just let her keep going. She talked about the 15 years they had, taking care of the house. About all the repairs and renovations they'd made. About how I already had my own life and didn't need it. Then, she said the most important part, there has to be a fair solution. Fair. I looked at her. What does fair mean? She listed it out. Sell the house and split the money. Or let them keep living there. Or I sign papers so they receive most of the assets. Not one word about Thanksgiving. Not a single apology. Not once did she acknowledge what they had done. There was only one thing that mattered. The house. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life I saw it clearly. She wasn't there for me. She was there for what I had. I placed my phone on the table between us. No explanation, no warning, I just pressed play. Laughter filled the crowded cafe. Through the glass, the image appeared. Me sitting on the porch holding a plate of food, the door locked behind me, wind tangling my hair. My mom watched. At first, annoyance. Then, silence. When my sister's voice came through, she's actually doing it. My mom blinked. When someone said dogs eat outside, she turned her face away. I didn't stop it. I let the entire video play. No cuts, no skipping, no lowering the volume. When the screen went dark, I asked, which part of that was temporary? She didn't answer, just stared down at the table. Which part was a misunderstanding? I asked again. Still silence. Then she said one thing, your sister shouldn't have posted that. I gave a small nod. That was the closest she came to admitting anything. Not because of what happened, but because it was recorded. That's where we're different, I said. You're embarrassed it was seen. I paused. I'm disgusted it happened. The air between us went cold, and for the first time, she had nothing left to negotiate. Not because I won, but because the truth spoke for me. I left the cafe without looking back. No arguments, no further explanations, because everything that needed to be said had already been said. In the days that followed, things moved faster than I expected. The family found out. The video spread. People who had stayed silent started to reconsider. Some apologized, some avoided me. But the most important thing, the story no longer belonged to them. My grandmother finalized the paperwork. The house was transferred to me. No disputes. No way to reverse it. Just the truth, turned into something legal. My stepfather tried to demand compensation for the renovations. The lawyer responded with one fact: 15 years of living there for free. That ended everything. 6 months later, they had to move out. I didn't go. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. The day I walked into that house alone, everything was quiet. No more mocking laughter, no more looks of contempt. Just me. And a space I was never allowed to belong to. I started renovating the laundry room, the place where I used to sleep, not to forget, but to finish it. I didn't win because they lost the house. I won because I no longer needed their acceptance. And for the first time, I had a place that was truly mine.